With the biggest wide receiver domino fallen, let's talk about the options the Bengals have for extending Jamar Chase.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network here on Locked On Bengals, covering your team every day on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. If you're new to the show, you can hit that subscribe button. You can join the many thousands of Bengals fans who subscribe to this program and stay up to date on the Cincinnati Bengals this way. All the everydayers out there and everyone who makes us your first listen, we appreciate you for making us part of your routine. And James, after Justin Jefferson's mega deal last week, we talked about the options for Jamar Chase a little bit, and having since then seen the reaction from probably a vocal minority of Bengals fans, but certainly a traumatized section of the fan base that watched the Bengals pay Carson Palmer and Chad Johnson, watched the Bengals pay Andy Dalton and AJ Green, are now worried about this idea of paying Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, partially just based on the team's history of paying these guys and partially looking around the league and the teams that are winning in the Super Bowl. So let's start there before we talk about the options directly. Should the Bengals extend Jamar Chase? Is a pretty basic question that apparently we need to answer.
Hell yes, they should extend Jamar Chase to a record-setting deal, and we can get into all of those things. But let's go back. You remember, and this is when we technically weren't hosting together at the time. But when Joe Burrow from his parents' house got on and he had the Athens area code shirt and he was just the number one pick, and he got on the Zoom call and he's talking and he's smiling. I saw a clip of that recently. And he has the Bengals hat on and he looks really thin. And it's like, oh, that's Joe Burrow the night he was the number one pick. He's holding up the Bengals jersey that the Bengals sent him days in advance. Well, the contract he signed last year was exactly what the Bengals hoped would happen. It's exactly what you hoped would happen. It's exactly what everyone should have hoped happened, because it means that Joe Burrow is really, 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 really good, great, whatever you want to use to describe him on the football field. And so think about when Jamar Chase was drafted a year later and the broadcast was like, oh, here we go. And they were reacting to it because it was the Penei Sewell versus Jamar Chase. And Jamar's walking across the stage, the draft stage, and he's got the Bengal colored shoes on, orange and black, and he puts the Bengals hat on. And a few minutes later, when he was doing the media call, what did he say? I'm going to break every record they have, referring to AJ Green, Chad Johnson. He said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but it's going to get done. The market changed for receivers, but that doesn't mean that you didn't hope to pay him. This is exactly what you hope for with every first round pick the Bengals make from here until forever, right? I could say it about Dax Hill. The Bengals are hoping Dax Hill is a lockdown corner now, and they have to pay him a lot of money in a couple of years because he's just awesome at corner. That's more far-fetched than Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, but you get the point. So absolutely you pay Jamar Chase. This is a good problem to have. This is the exact problem that you want your draft picks to put you in, where you're like, man, they're so good, we got to keep them. That's great. That's a good problem to have, a great problem to have. And so, yes, you pay Jamar Chase. It's not a dilemma. It's not a debate. We can get into the team building elements some, because there have been people that have discussed that. But the night Jamar was drafted, the hope was that he would become one of these elite receivers that commands elite money and gives Joe Burrow an elite weapon. Check, check, check. And it's just a matter of when, not if, in my opinion, the Bengals sign him to a long-term extension.
And I mentioned this on Twitter. When you look at the Justin Jefferson deal, it's not like it's unprecedented from a percentage of the cap at the time of signing either. That's a 13.7% of the cap deal for Justin Jefferson. That's where DeAndre Hopkins' deal in 2020 for 2 years checked in. That's where Jerry Rice's deal back in 1996 actually exceeded. That was a 14.2% of the cap at the time for Jerry Rice for 5 years in 1996. And it's right in the same ballpark as Randy Moss, a 7-year deal, different CBA, back in 2001. Devontae Adams, 5-year deal in 2022. these are all in the same ballpark. Calvin Johnson, 7 years, Larry Fitzgerald, 7 years on different CBAs, and eclipsing by a fair amount Cooper Kupp and AJ Brown's 3-year deals in 2022 and 2024. But the number of 35 million is huge. And so it looks particularly striking when you set a record-setting number. But when you look at it as a percentage of the cap, if Jamar ends up checking in at a number bigger than Justin Jefferson, and it's still 13.7% of the cap, which is probably the number that we should be looking at whenever we get around to this Jamar Chase extension, whether it's this year or next year. And I don't necessarily think that they're going to rush either side to get it done this year, but we'll talk about that as well. That's probably the number that we should be looking at. And if that's the case, it'll be around $35 to $37 million per year for Jamar Chase. And it'll be a lot. It'll be a top of the market deal. And Justin Jefferson's contract has certainly raised the floor in one way or another. Whether or not you think Jamar is going to beat Justin Jefferson's deal, that brings up the number that Jamar Chase is going to get, just because of how much it went up from the most recent deal, which was AJ Brown's. But you also have the CeeDee Lamb domino to fall, the potential Tyreek Hill domino to fall. But to your point, James, yeah, you should pay your great players. We have complaints about the Bengals not doing this in recent history with Jesse Bates. And you could even go back to Andrew Whitworth, a bit of a different story.
Higgins. I mean, people are saying him. Yeah.
But the team building element, I guess, is interesting. You know, the wide receivers are expensive. So when everyone's zigging toward wide receivers, you should zag. I think there's something there, but that is more of a thing when you don't have the great player on your team already. The NFL isn't at a place where you operate like a low budget baseball team in Major League Baseball, where you get a player for his cost controlled years through arbitration. And then you're like, okay, I can't pay this player anymore, so we're going to let him go. You don't treat draft picks that way in the NFL, because everybody makes the same money from revenue sharing. There's a salary cap in this league. Everybody has the same money to divvy up. So I don't think that there's really a place for treating it like, yeah, we'll have this great player for only their rookie contract, for most positions anyway. Maybe you can make an argument for running back anyway, but you're also potentially going to see in the near future, people are talking about the running back market bouncing back. So yeah, they should pay Jamar Chase because he's one of a handful of all pro level players on this team. Mm-hmm. And that's not even considering the relationship between Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, and the relationship between Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, and how those things would be potentially impacted by not trying to get a deal done, which
you need
factors the Bengals should be considering.
You need an elite weapon, period. That's it. And I don't want to hear about Patrick Mahomes, because Travis Kelce is the best tight end in the league. He is. And they're paying him like it, by the way. It's not like he took a team-friendly deal this offseason. He just got paid, right? And they're paying
tight ends are just cheaper for some stupid reason than wide receivers.
And they're paying Chris Jones, and they're paying Patrick Mahomes. Like, you pay your elite guys, and then you have to draft well around them. It's a great problem to have. I really hope that the Bengals have to find a way to pay Amarius Mims in 4 years, because he's an elite tackle in the NFL. Right? Like, that's what you're hoping for.
Yeah.
And Jamar has checked those boxes. And so, yeah, as far as a team building perspective, it means you have to draft well. We talked about it in this draft, how important it was to set the table for the remainder of this decade. And Jamar could very well, when he does sign that extension, which we'll get into details of what it could look like in a second, he could be the face alongside Joe Burrow of the Bengals for this decade. So you have to build around them by drafting well, by hitting on the Jermaine Burtons of the world, and the Amarius Mimses of the world, and the Miles Murphys of the world. And so we'll see if they do that, if those guys are hits. But when it comes to Jamar, it's really a no-brainer. And that's why I keep saying when, not if, it gets done. And it's not like we're saying, all right, we should pay everyone. We're saying pay Jamar Chase, the second biggest star on the team, and pay Joe Burrow, which they've already done. So let's discuss what a Jamar Chase contract could look like, and we'll continue this conversation before we get to Joe Burrow coming up next.
This episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by FanDuel Sportsbook, and it's summertime, and FanDuel knows what's going on this summer. It's Major League Baseball with the Reds on a winning streak over the weekend, dealing with the Rockies and the Cubs, and the NBA Finals going on. And if you're a hockey fan, well, you got the NHL Stanley Cup to bet on as well, and you can get into all of that and more over on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now they're offering you $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You bet $5 on the Celtics to win a game. Well, you get $200 in bonus bets, which you can use on finals MVP, home run props, or the Bengals 9.5-point favorite line in week 1 against the New England Patriots, the biggest favorites in the NFL that week. Again, $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet over at FanDuel.com/lockedon, where you can check it all out and get started. Whatever your flavor of sports betting is, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Another factor when you consider the Jamar Chase extension that I want to talk about, as I bumped my mic stand there, sorry about that if you heard it, is positional spending and future allocations for the Bengals. And then we'll talk about the deal itself. But people are worried about Joe Burrow's cap hit. The way the Bengals did that deal, there's no absolutely massive cap hit coming. There are big cap hits, but even looking into the future, going out to 2026, when the Joe Burrow money is in full effect, the Bengals have like the 10th biggest or maybe even lower QB allocation in terms of cap hit, according to Over the Cap. They haven't done something like the Ravens, where Lamar Jackson's cap hit is over $70 million and is going to be restructured, or even the Kansas City Chiefs or the Cleveland Browns or Buffalo Bills, where you have these $60+ million cap hits that are going to need to be restructured. Burrow in 2026 is only at a $49 million cap hit. In 2027, it goes up to 52. And even in 2027, which you're looking 4 years into the future at that point, so most teams don't have quarterbacks under contract. It's not even, it's behind Jared Goff. It's behind the Lions. It's behind the Bills. It's behind the Falcons. Somehow it's behind the Chargers, it's behind the Chiefs, it's behind the Ravens. So while Burrow's getting paid, it's not going to age as something that's insane with the continuing expansion of the cap, which is why we always talk about getting these deals done earlier than later, which is why it would behoove the Bengals to get the deal done as soon as possible before there's increased inflation that ends up hitting these markets. Because as we saw with Patrick Mahomes' deal changing the quarterback market, and we're going to see with Justin Jefferson's deal changing the wide receiver market, these prices are going to go up. But who else are you paying is the other question. Who else are you worried about the Bengals losing if they pay Jamar Chase, a deal that won't have a cap hit kick in, by the way, big time until 2026, which is, or 2027? 2027, is that right? No, it is 2026. Yeah, because he's for fifth-year option 2025. So they can spread costs out by using remaining rookie year. They can use that fifth-year option year to spread some money out a little bit. They can use an option bonus like the Vikings did with Justin Jefferson to prorate money after the first year, and that's a proratable bonus that kicks in the second year of the deal. You can do that with Jamar Chase if they want to too, which they probably will. And so they have all these options to defray costs and all this stuff. But again, like, who else are we worried about the Bengals being able to pay right now? That's a question. That's like a real question.
Sure. 1, 2, there's no one more important in that building outside of Joe Burrow. It's just, it's the reality of it. And in a couple of things. 1, people are like, oh, Joe Burrow should have taken less. It's a pretty team-friendly structure. It is. That's why it took so long, the negotiations, because they wanted to massage those cap hits out as much as possible. And I could see the same with Jamar. Jamar wants his money, but how it's structured, how it looks on paper, I don't think he minds that much. As long as he's getting his money, obviously he'll want to hit those benchmarks. And the other element here, you're right. Who else are they paying? But we talked about last week, actually a week ago. So check it out. On the questions around the offense, Jamar Chase is 24 years old. I know he had 1,455 yards as a rookie. He's been really, really productive over the past couple of years. Have we seen the best of Jamar Chase yet? Because I think I could make a pretty darn good argument that, especially if you extended him now and somehow got him locked up 3 years, 4 years. 4 years would be ideal because you could spread it out over the next 6. It would give the Bengals Burrow and Chase under contract through 2029. I don't know if Chase would go for it, but I would try to do that if I'm the Bengals. And why you would want to do it this year? What if the offense does take a huge step forward? What if Jamar is just hits another level this year? I think at some point we're going to see it where he goes for 1,800 yards or goes for 2,000 yards or wins Offensive Player of the Year or is just this dominant force that I think he can be, that we haven't, not that he hasn't been dominant during stretches over the past couple of years, but you look at the numbers and it's not like he had back-to-back 1,700-yard seasons. And so is he capable of that? I think he is. I think it could happen. And so that's why you invest in that guy. He's not just your average 1,200-yard receiver. He's much, much more than that. And so I think some look up his stats and are like, oh, well, Jamar is, no. It's not Jamar. Jamar is one of these freaks that could go win Offensive Player of the Year. And there aren't many receivers that I think have a real shot at winning that award year in and year out. And he's certainly one of them.
Yeah, I think the stats are a little deceiving. And so you can't just look at the stats, obviously, but you should look at the stats a little bit, I guess, when you're thinking about, what the Bengals will do, how the Bengals will behave, and the comparison to Justin Jefferson. And will they feel comfortable touching the Justin Jefferson number when he's been more productive over his career? Argument is that they probably will, just given the other free agents. So when Jamar becomes a free agent, the other guys scheduled to become a free agent that year that are under the age of 30 on this roster are Geno Stone, Zach Moss will be 29, Dax Hill, if they don't pick up his 5th-year option, will be 26, Cam Taylor-Britt will be 27. They will look to probably extend Cam Taylor-Britt at that time. Cordell Volson will be 28, and Jake Browning will be a restricted free agent because they have that much team control over Jake Browning, and he'll be 30. So, it's not like there are other big expenses you're expecting to drop the year Jamar is scheduled to become a free agent anyway. So while I don't think there are many people arguing that the Bengals should not sign Jamar Chase to an extension, hopefully that is a thorough explanation of why they should. I don't know how else they would spend the money, for one, and two, he's a very special player and you should pay your special players. And James, you've talked about some of the options of getting this done sooner than later, or even if it is next year, 3 and 4 year options. Those are the two durations that I think we're considering, given the recent history at wide receiver. Do you have some contract ideas?
Yeah, I do. I think it's so interesting because the Justin Jefferson 4-year model, he waited after his 4th year to get this deal. And so if a deal doesn't get done this offseason, I'm not panicking because literally the guy that everyone's been calling the best receiver in the league, and the numbers say it, he didn't get a deal until after his 4th year. So there's that. But if I'm the Bengals, I would just offer it now with a little sweetener in there, a little more money in there, a little more guaranteed money, the Justin Jefferson deal. So you have him for 6 years. I don't know if Jamar would be willing to do that. The other blueprint, instead of a, let's say, 4-year, $150 million deal with 120 guaranteed. I'm just throwing out, it's more than Jamar, or it's more than Justin, but it gives the Bengals another year to massage out those cap hits and spread the money around. Or maybe he goes the Jalen Waddle route, which is 3 years, which would give him 5 years with the Bengals, make him a free agent before he's 29 years old, or going into his age 29 season, and set for free agency so he can get another bite of the apple. I could see that too. And so what would that look like? Maybe it's $35 million per, like Justin Jefferson, but for 3 years. So a 3-year, $105 million extension with 95 guaranteed or 90 guaranteed or whatever it is, right? And so you could go that route too. I would rather, with the cap always going up, with the wide receiver market bound to go up, if I'm the Bengals, you try to get that 4-year deal done now. I don't know even if Jamar would listen to that, because 3 makes way more sense if it's going to be this offseason, or 4 next offseason, which again is the blueprint that Justin Jefferson has laid out and given the Bengals.
Yeah, teams always incentivized to get the longest deals done as early as possible with the current nature of the ever expanding NFL cap and revenue streams. I just think they would want to get it synced up with Joe Burrow, who's not
Yep.
scheduled to become a free agent until 2030.
For
And so
4
that
year
would be full.
this offseason, 4
Yeah.
year, baby. Let's knock it out.
And if that's the case, knowing the way the Bengals do contracts, we talked about Orlando Brown being the former biggest non-quarterback signing bonus the Bengals had ever done. I think Jamar Chase has a pretty great shot at breaking that mark for the Cincinnati Bengals. Coming up next to finish up the show, minicamp is this week. We are expecting to see Joe Burrow after we did not see him last week. Let's discuss expectations for Joe Burrow at this week's minicamp. Joe Burrow expected to participate in Cincinnati Bengals mandatory minicamp this week. There was some hand-wringing last week, James, some concern over Joe Burrow missing the open practice on Tuesday and the rest schedule, and is everything okay? And we'll get a really good idea this week. We won't know until Tuesday. The first open practice of minicamp is Tuesday. The second is Wednesday. And if they hold a third, which might end up just being a walkthrough, that will be Thursday. It's in the so we're gonna have to be a little patient, but we'll get a pretty good idea of where Joe Burrow's at, if there's actually any reason for concern. I would continue to maintain that everything I'm hearing, everything that we've observed, is that there's no cause for alarm here. This is normal rest, normal management of a guy rehabbing an injury. And it's also June. It's early June. They're about to have a month off. So there's that too. But we will get a much better idea of where he's at when we see him with presumably the entire team sans T. Higgins at minicamp this week.
Yeah. I think everyone will be there besides T. And we obviously know the situation July 15th. They have until July 15th to get a deal done. I think he's going to continue to train in Miami. That's fine. Keep trying to work hard, T. As far as Joe goes, we'll see this week. I expect to see him. I'm excited to see him during minicamp and throw with Jamar. And it could be that simple where they're like, yeah, we're going to probably go pretty hard back-to-back days for minicamp. Hard, it was relatively speaking in June. Let's give him an extra day. And I'm okay with that. I'm fine with this coaching staff being willing to be like, Joe, you're sitting this one out, and that's it. Like not some kind of gray area where he can kind of work his way onto the field and try to, because that's what he does. He's addicted, right? That's why he's awesome. That's why he's so great. Addicted to performing and lifting and training. And that's why he's like a top 3 person on the planet at what he does, or top 2, or whatever you want to debate. He's one of these elite guys. And so he's going to try to be out there. And it is June. Let's be honest, Jake. No one gives a damn about June. I know we do. We cover it and we care. We discuss it. But this isn't what people are going to remember. People are going to remember is he healthy for week 1? Is he healthy for week 5? What about the short week going to Baltimore? Is he healthy going into December and in January and hopefully February when they're trying to make a trip to the big one in the Big Easy? So we'll see. But yeah, I think that this is the right call. And I'm not going to ring the alarm bells, even in training camp, if they're on again, off again with him. And on days, especially like the head of the day before an off day, if it's not one of their harder practices and they're going late that day, if he's out doing everything, I'm not going to lose it here, because this is about getting him to week 1. We know how significant that wrist injury was. I don't need him exhausting himself now, even if he doesn't realize it. And that could be part of it, is you want to just have these days in place, like Zach said earlier or last week, because of that. So it makes sense to me, and I'm excited to see him this week, and I think he'll be throwing the ball all over.
And if the plan was for him to take these 2 days in a row, and they've been trying to avoid the 2 days in a row, which is roughly what Zach said, wasn't entirely clear to me whether it's always been on, off for Burrow throughout this offseason program. But if they wanted to go 2 days in a row for minicamp, then maybe then they're just approaching that with that goal in mind.
Yeah, no doubt. I think we haven't heard anything otherwise, so why assume the worst? I don't think there's reason to do that. He's looked good. He's checked every box that we expected him to up to this point. And so we'll see during minicamp if he continues to do that. And then, by the way, he's going to be training. I know you said they're off, and they are off. He's going to be training. We know that, and the Bengals know that. So they're probably like, all right, how many more passes does he need to throw to Jermaine Burton? We're good for now. He's going to be throwing a ton in camp and working this offseason, and probably has plans to throw with Jamar and maybe multiple other guys. Like, would not shock me at all if they're like, let's dial it back a little bit before minicamp.
How much actual vacation do you think Joe Burrow is going to take? Because I think he'll take like a week or at least some time to get. He does like to decompress. He's talked about that before, but for the most part, he kind of also loves the daily grind. But do you think there's vacation coming for Joe?
I don't think there's a vacation where he doesn't train every single day between now and every single day. Now, that doesn't mean like hard throwing.
Yeah.
It means lifting, running, jumping, all, because he loves that too, which I get. I totally get. But yeah, like I know he's gone on family vacations and he still gets his training done in the morning. And I'm sure he may have one plan that, during the stretch, this is the time to do it. So to your point, yeah, I think he'll go on a vacation, and he should. But will he still get some training in? I think so too.
It's the time of year where, especially this year, you kind of envy the fans that are like, all right, the preseason's over. The Bengals are playing the Patriots in week 1. All right, let's go. And they're not paying attention right now. The ones that are just like living their lives in the summer, not hanging on every word we say. Although appreciate all of you who live and hang on every word we say. But those that are like unaware of Joe Burrow's practice attendance in the offseason program, this is the time to envy those people who just don't know, just living their lives, not bothering them. Ignorance is bliss. Anyway.
At the same time, keep listening to Locked On Bengals, because we're going to cover minicamp all week long and have the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between.
We've also got one more episode before minicamp this week. I'll be talking with Mike Santagata at Bengals_Sands. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about what we're expecting from the Bengals from a scheme perspective this year, some scheme changes that may or may not be coming for the Bengals, barring something crazy happening between now and then that will force us to pivot and cover whatever that event is. Until then, and then minicamp to follow. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.